Shop the Sherwin-Williams 4th of July sale and get 30% off paints and stains June 26th through July 6th. Whether you're refreshing your interior or exterior, we've got the colors to bring your vision to life. And with delivery, getting everything to your door is easier than ever. Shop online to have it delivered or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details. Delivery available on qualifying orders.
Great dishes can be made on a whim, but it doesn't have to be limited to just one dish. Approaching one's kitchen prep with a strategy will help limit waste and do good for the environment while helping you save your hard-earned money.
Yay Networks.
A quick note before we dive into today's podcast. If you like what you hear, I would love for you to subscribe to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, wherever you download your podcast. It would also be incredible if you take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Those things do matter and they really help us. I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. So when we think about nutrition and we think about how we're planning our meals, a lot of times we're thinking of it around maybe a type of nutrition plan we're following if we're doing lower carb or we're trying to do more plant focused. But a lot of times what we're not thinking is how can we minimize the food that we're wasting? It may not be the most intriguing thoughts that we're having or maybe the sexiest conversation to have, but here's the thing, y'all. Between 30 and 40% of the food in the United States is thrown out. It's wasted. That's between 30 and 40% of our food. And so that's food that we're having in our own kitchens that's going to waste. It's foods that's happening in restaurant kitchens that is going to waste. And we're looking at the impact of that. It's about over 100 billion pounds, over $100 billion every year that is wasted. And so when we look at what can we do on an individual level, it may feel like it's impossible. Like, well, how can what we do, how can that move the needle? But when we're all a little bit more mindful, and when we also turn to the restaurants, the food service spaces that we're going to, and we try to do better ourselves and ask others to do better, it does start to compile, it does start to add up. So it's not just me talking about this today. I'm joined today by our executive chef, Ryan Conn. He's our executive chef with FUEL Café Market at Ochsner Fitness Center. Welcome, Ryan.
Hello, everyone. I'm super happy to be here. Thanks for listening to me wherever y'all are right now. It's a pleasure.
This is your first podcast?
First podcast. It feels a lot more natural than having a camera in my face right now. I feel good about this. The first time we were on TV together was live, and that was a good way to really jump into the fire. But it's first podcast. Super happy to be here.
It might have been your first week we threw you on TV.
Yeah, it was very much. we were going full steam ahead for sure.
So Ryan has been with us coming up on a year now with
about a year.
Ochsner Fitness Center. And so we do a lot together with Eat Fit dishes. Chef Ryan creates these, Eat Fit dishes that, we're selling in the cafe that are just super wildly popular inside of our fitness center, outside of it, working on some really cool projects that y'all will start to see more of too, even outside of the fitness center. But before that, you've worked at the Roosevelt Hotel. And, that was a whole, a large scale production. But before that, you had a lot of experience with Satsuma, which is I guess you were kitchen manager, et cetera, chef there. Satsuma is like a heavy focus, emphasis on local, sustainable, organic. Is that really kind of where you got your feet wet in that specific kind of learning more about it?
Yeah, I would think so. I have to give a lot of credit to Satsuma for just so many things, the way I work with other people. And I mean, we were, I was kind of working in the Bywater in 2012, 2013 when I first started there. And it was like before like inclusivity was really a hot word and like a lot of corporations now it was just people, the Bywater in New Orleans is just such a kind of, what's the right word? It's kind of like where everyone that's coming to the city or a lot of cool kids that are coming to the city for their time, they all come there. So, I mean, just people from everywhere, every different, way that one can self-identify. But yeah, they're definitely hopped on would go to the farmer's market all the time, would also, Covey Ride's truck would pull up, hop on the back of the truck. So, I mean, at the Roosevelt, mass production, huge amounts of food and tons of waste, unfortunately. And kind of, Satsuma was a bit of a different story where like everything was fresh every day, every 2 days. I mean, there was nothing that got thrown out because we did such a high volume and it was all just fresh every day. So, a little bit of, I'm sure what we're going to get into comes from both of those experiences.
And then you've learned from both of those too, because there's also on a larger scale, there's things that restaurants can do for food donations and minimizing food waste. So when we look at, we'll be talking today about, really spending a good bit of time on why we should care about this. Like, why does it matter? Because if you do think, oh, well, I had, that broccoli that I intended on preparing, that fresh broccoli, and it went bad and I threw it away. While we think, well, it's a few sprigs of broccoli. Like, why does that matter? When we look at how much does that add up and we look at, wow, over time, and we look at across the United States, it's a third of our food is basically going into the trash. And then we think about how many people all over the world could really benefit from this. And there's a lot of reasons of like why to care. When we look at the environmental impact, I didn't realize this, but food waste creates more carbon emissions than the airline industry. And that's crazy.
Yeah. Right.
Like that's really, really wild. And so again, it can seem overwhelming for us to one-on-one try to make these changes, but it does start with individual habits. And then we can start to put that ask on our restaurants, our food service spaces to really start to change on more of a global scale. So when we look at the role that we can play, it's also, I think, when we think about there's the environmental part, but again, it can be hard to say, it's sort of like health. If someone's like only going to change their habits because they want to make sure that one day they don't get high blood pressure, it can be hard for that to influence your decisions right now. When you're thinking, well, I want to avoid in 20 years, I don't want to get whatever. It's hard to change that behavior now. I think it's a similar thing when it feels like such a drop in the bucket. But when you think about, like, I was kind of reading it through this lens, that avoiding wasting food, looking at it as kind of that philosophy and looking at it as a respect for the people who've raised that food, the farmers or the ingredients or the land or kind of what went into it. And we can be so far removed from our food, and many of us aren't really growing it or we're not connected with that side of it, that it can feel like you just stop in a shop and pick it up. But instead, trying to have a little bit more of maybe that awareness of everything that had to happen for us to receive it.
Yeah, I think also kind of a great way to put it that hits home is think of, a third of what you spend at the groceries, just burning the money.
Right.
Or just completely, let's say we just, for the sake of conversation, we spend $100 at the grocery store, $30 or so of it gets thrown away. So how do we help people with whether it's planning, how to preserve or save an item, maybe how to work an item into another dish, or I think there's opportunities that we're going to go over.
So if the environment is not enough for you, if the philosophical side of it is, and the respect for kind of like where it all came from isn't enough, at least maybe our wallets.
Yeah, just think of it that way. I mean, when
Right.
I'll go to the grocery store, and I mean, maybe by the time I have to go to the grocery again, maybe there's some like bad collard greens or kale in it. It breaks my heart so much because I love collard greens and kale. But that's like, that's maybe $2, $3, $4 a bundle or so, and it's just trash. I mean, it's literally money that you just throw away.
Right. Like you're literally like leaving it on the street.
Yeah.
And would you like walk away from, like, you're not going to put a $10 bill on the ground and just walk away, but whatever it is, like, or like you said, if you're spending $100, $33 on average, if that's what we're throwing away, it is. It's really, so if nothing else is a motivator, let's let that be. So when we're looking at, there's a bunch of reasons to care, and it's sort of like with anything, it's tuning into what aspect of that really matters the most to you. And Chef Ryan and I are going to be talking about, several different, I guess, steps and kind of strategies that we can look at to help minimize that hit on our pocketbook, to minimize that hit on the environment. We'll start with planning, and planning, there's a whole lot of things that go into that. It doesn't have to be hard, but planning is not just making your shopping list and heading to the store. We'll kind of get a little bit more of what do we mean by that. We'll be talking about scraps, and I like the idea of cooking with scraps. I save all types of things, because there's always ways that either I'm just going to want to have that little nugget as a snack later, or I'm going to want to use it in something. So we'll be talking about scraps. We'll be talking about repurposing. So taking leftovers and giving them a new life, maybe as something else. And then how to save food, how to save it for later and like really later at times and still have that good quality. And then we'll hit on composting for a little bit. To me, that's one of the things that can feel maybe the most intimidating or the more labor intensive, but I do think it's worth mentioning when we talk about minimizing food waste. So planning ahead, is this something that you do? I mean, obviously you do it with FUEL Café.
Yeah, y'all don't see me over here grinning right now because I'm just thinking of these stories from some previous business owners and chefs that I've worked with that have really had some very, very, very clever ways to use scraps and reuse those scraps again. That we can get into a little bit, but I'm just kind of like, I'm just putting them up there for like kind of archiving it for later. But I mean, we would just we would do just kind of briefly, because I'm on the topic, we would a staff meal at a restaurant I worked at. We weren't allowed to use butter, we weren't allowed to use meat because all that was so expensive. We would use kitchen stock, aka sink water. And we would, it would be, let's say it was like maybe like a stir fry with some vegetables. Maybe there's like a little bit of some like fish that we clean left over, and we'll stir fry that with vegetables. And then the next day it's that same thing with pasta. And then maybe the next day that's kind of inside of a calzone or something.
Like the pasta with the vegetables.
Yeah, and then it becomes it kind of just keeps going like to where, you get to like your fourth or your fifth work day of the week and you're like, I've seen this before. When did I have this?
It's like a sourdough starter that you kind of keep adding to and it lasts for years.
Exactly.
Like it's this one little like piece that builds and it keeps like evolving and growing into something else.
Yes, he was a very, 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 he still has a restaurant in the city. He sold this place, but very successful chef and knew how to do everything where there was no waste at all. It was really kind of remarkable, but I'm sorry, I kind of got a little
brilliant.
bit off of the.
I mean, although it could be, you want to, I guess, in a restaurant, or if you're doing that, you want to make sure that maybe it's not quite so apparent.
We weren't doing it for the customers.
That's
we were doing it. Yeah, you kind of.
And it's a free meal. It's a free staff meal.
Yeah, it's a free staff meal. It's like, hey, if you don't want it, I mean, you got.
It's a free staff meal that's also homemade.
Yeah, and it was always good.
Yeah.
Or I was always hungry. I don't
right.
know. It was one of the two.
Right, like you weren't like turning your nose up at it. So with planning ahead, this is one where, in a restaurant, or you would think that in a restaurant or in a space like our FUEL Café and Market at Ochsner Fitness Center, you're planning, like what's going to be going out into the cafe each day. We have things that are standards every day. There's you'll find kind of the things in our grab and go space that you can come in, pick it up, and it's kind of in that chilled area. Those things are the same largely day to day with some variation. And then we have like daily specials that come through kind of in our little heat and eat meals. And that's all like on a meal rotation. So that's sort of built in naturally for you as far as like planning ahead. But have there been places that you've worked where people literally like don't know what's going to be and it's what do we have today and we're going to make it? Because we've worked with chefs like that. It is just like day of, they're deciding what are they going to make, which to me doesn't seem like a very efficient approach.
No, it's not. I mean, you definitely want to, I think in a business, you certainly want to have a plan when you're spending, I don't know, maybe you're spending at the Roosevelt, we might spend $40,000 in a week on food. So I mean, we definitely had a plan for it. Satsuma was a little different where it was kind of free. And we would, I was saying earlier, I would hop on the back of the Covey Rise was a kind of, they're probably still around. I haven't done any business with them lately, but they would drive a truck around with a ton of amazing produce. And, I would hop on it Thursday, write the specials. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we would, sell out of it.
Right.
But I knew that I planned to buy X amount knowing that I wanted to sell out of most of it.
Right. But even that, the plan was we're going to do based on what's local.
So what you're saying is that y'all would sometimes go into a restaurant and like they would like just not know what they're doing or not have
different chefs that we've worked with over the years. Mostly they would know, but there's been some that we've worked with in different areas, some in different capacities, maybe not even with Eat Fit, but in different other spaces. And they would just, let's see what's in our cooler today.
I wonder how that works. I mean, do they just have like a standing par where they know like every day there's going to be?
It didn't seem very organized. It seemed incredibly wasteful and disorganized.
There must have been someone. Sometimes there's a bit of there could be someone that's doing your purchasing. So sometimes there would be the chef and there would be the person doing the purchasing, and maybe in that place someone was just doing the purchasing and then the chef comes in. And I think maybe in a scenario like that, that's where you do run into a lot of food waste.
Yeah. Because if there's no plan or things are being purchased and there's large amounts of certain ingredients being purchased and then they're not being used, think of your home as the same. Like think of your home as like your business that you're going to be running as well. So like Chef Ryan is like, okay, we know we have these things that are happening on the daily. These things, these foods are always going to be going out to the cafe. That might be the things that you're having through the day for your snacks or your breakfast or what you're bringing for lunch. And then the daily specials that Ryan's doing might be your dinner, And so there's certain things that we're going to have that are going to be like our everydays. And then what are we going to have day to day? Looking ahead to think what, but loosely kind of sketching out what you're going to have through the week, knowing, okay, we have we have some events this week. We have dinner out Tuesday and Wednesday night. So when we're going to the grocery store on the weekend, realizing, oh wait, for 2 of the nights, we won't have the usual dinners at home that we do. So we need to adjust what we purchase accordingly. We do that a lot of times. We might be buying things like fresh fish on the weekend and stuff that we kind of think, all right, how many days we're going to be home or whatever that might be. But do it loose enough, y'all, that you're not so bound to a recipe or a specific type of a food that you're not going to use something that you already have on hand. So part of planning ahead is going to be thinking ahead to what meals you're going to make. And we'll also be talking about kind of repurposing and taking some of those leftovers. But if you are inspired by recipes or even following a type of a plan that you're following whatever it is, kind of nutritional program, if something calls for broccoli, for example, and you happen to have cauliflower on hand, just swap it out. If something calls for salmon, but you happen to have tuna or another kind of local fish, swap it out. So that loose plan, but making sure that you're flexible enough. The idea that something is going to be like the perfect recipe for something isn't. I mean, you can always be creative and kind of mix and match that.
I'm glad you mentioned if you're a recipe person, because there are people, and I'm one when I need to be, but at home I don't follow recipes. Even my cookbooks, like I just kind of read through it I like to read about the philosophy of the restaurant or the chef or whatever. But Amanda, my fiance, she is very recipe driven. And I mean, I'll go to the store and I'll just kind of buy this and that because
you're comfortable with it.
And I feel experienced enough that I know that even though I don't have a plan, that's the plan.
Right.
But working in a restaurant, it's not like an episode of Chopped where it's just all this cool stuff everywhere and you're like, what am I going to do today? And then all that stuff gets like thrown away, or hopefully they donate it all. But yes, everything is very, 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 in my experience, and especially at the Roosevelt, where planning was crucial, because we would have maybe 2 days of no business and then a day of 600 people for, let's say, like a corporate dinner event. And then the next day there's a wedding for 250 people. It was all based off of a formulation that, X amount of ounces of protein per person, X amount of ounces of vegetables per person. It varied if it was a buffet versus a plated dinner or plated event. And then also, depending sometimes, I mean, there's just so many, like planning was very, very important at the Roosevelt. I'd often ask about, kind of when we would do pre-planning meetings, we'd ask about the demographic, like what's the group like? I mean, if it's a group of all women versus a group of all men, they're going to eat differently. If it's a group that's local versus a group that's from the Midwest, they're going to eat seafood differently. So there was a lot of planning that went into it.
And the variation that if you messed up by 10% when you're talking about the amount that goes into food costs is a lot. So you've got to be super careful with that. when you're thinking about planning ahead and you're thinking about like, how do you stock your own kitchen? Think of it like there's certain kind of staples that you're going to just keep around and keep it simple, stick with stuff that you know, stick with stuff that you're comfortable with, you're going to reach for it, and have those be sort of your core. And that can be kind of your go-to, like with Chef Ryan, the stuff that's going to be out in the cafe day after day after day. That's kind of like your staples. And then whatever that special of the day is, maybe mix it up with a couple of those each week. But if you know that you love, certain key ingredients, keep those and then add in a little bit of variety or try a little bit of new recipes. But sort of thinking of it as like the base or like the building blocks that you have, like your core staples. And every week doesn't have to be completely new and innovative. Like you can add in some new things. I forgot to mention that we have another guest with us. She's getting talkative.
Maybe you hear a little cheep.
We've got Lucky with us. So this is probably the 4th podcast that we've recorded with Lucky here. Not all of them have aired yet.
The first official introduction.
So Lucky is just happy to be right next to us, but sometimes she just gets really talkative. Last thing on planning, thinking about how much you need when you're buying it. So if you are a Costco person, like we have a Costco membership, but we're often using it not for things like a big slab of meat, because we're just not going to have that. We might use it for beverages or things that aren't necessarily as perishable or going to go bad, versus buying like loads of even fresh peaches. They can be so tempting and so beautiful, but it's hard for us to eat a whole flat of peaches from Costco.
Yeah, I was at home. It's the planning part is just it differs house by house. I mean, it's easy for me to say I don't have any kids and I don't have an intense schedule where I'm like, I'll go to the store every 3 days.
Right. You can be much more flexible.
But I mean, for some people, you go to the store once a week or once every other week, and you buy a ton of stuff because you have a demanding work schedule and maybe your kids have sports and school and all that stuff. So
you're right.
I think in a perfect world, we would rather, not that we want the food to go bad anyway, but I would rather the food go bad on the grocery store shelf than on my shelf at home. So if you do have the opportunity maybe to go to the store a little more frequently and spend buy a little less, maybe that could just be just a little trick that you try, to change up your routine a little bit. I mean, we don't have a ton of farmers markets every day, but could you imagine like living here and being like, nah, I'm just going to walk down the street. 7 days a week, there's a farmer's market. Like I'm just going to buy fish for today and some vegetables. And then in 2 days, I'll go buy fish again. But like the reality is,
if it was close proximity to you. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll hit the farmer's market in New Orleans on Tuesday every once in a while, but it's not like we live in a small village where there's like, every other day there's a farmer's market and you just go and you prepare a meal for a day or two. Like you really do have to spend time doing meal prep and also, planning wisely to make sure that you don't end up burning any of your hard-earned cash.
It is. It absolutely takes planning. So in theory and like in a perfect world, like Chef Ryan said, you could go to a place and buy larger quantities of certain foods, portion it out, divvy it out, store it that way. And maybe that's where, things might be more cost effective that way. And then you could supplement with it with fresh produce from the market or something like that. But it's got to be what's going to work for you. And even if you aren't one that can get to the farmer's market, I would ask, even if just like once a month you go to like a Saturday market near you, especially if you have kids, bringing the kids there, things look different than what you're going to see in the grocery stores. It's just, I think it's a good experience for kids to see produce that looks a little bit different, see that there's faces behind that produce. There's people who are bringing that to the market, and kind of just having that association, I think, is just a really good experience.
I totally agree. You may have a little chef growing up
right.
that you don't know about. I mean, so much of my inspiration comes from being at the store. I mean, I'll write a small list. I mean, if I need olive oil or something like that, because I don't want to forget it. But I mean, I'll go to the store or go to the farmer's market, and if I see really beautiful asparagus or whatever they may have, maybe they have beautiful purple asparagus or white asparagus or some cool like heirloom eggplants. I'll pick that up and I'll, and then my brain starts working like, what do I want to do with this eggplant? Maybe I'll get some shrimp or so. I find a lot of pleasure and inspiration doing that. I think it's a great idea having the kids go.
You can think about when you see that at the farmer's market, a lot of times it reminds you of something you had at a restaurant. Oh, wait, we had that at... And then you're like, how can I recreate that dish?
True.
Yeah.
And some people don't like to chat And I get that. I mean, you don't have the people selling the produce, they're not going to necessarily force you to chat, but but those are the people that most likely grew it. If
Right.
not, they're probably related to
Right.
the person that grew it. And
They can speak to it.
Yeah, and they'll also give you, I'm sure they love to cook it, and they'll give fabulous ideas and like, hey, what is this? And it's like, oh, it's this thing. You should try it this way. So, I mean, there's definitely a lot of inspiration and cool people to talk to. I mean, I love going to the farmer's market, but
When we
if
go,
only it happened more.
when we travel out of town and we go to the farmer's market, I love that too, because you see produce that maybe isn't things that we see on the regular. But depending on where we're staying, sometimes we're not in a place where we could like purchase any of it. And that's also really hard because you're seeing all this beautiful produce. But if you're, traveling or don't have the space. Okay, talk to us about when we talk about scraps. We can talk about cooking with scraps or using all those scraps. Some people refer to kind of this approach as like nose to tail cooking. It's basically not wasting any part of what we purchase. Like, give us the example with like, say, a carrot. You're buying like a whole carrot at the farmer's market or grocery store.
Yeah, you could use that whole carrot for, I mean, you don't even have to peel a carrot. And you may be able to kind of go on this and validate it, but I've heard that a fair amount of the nutrients are in the skin. Like, you don't really want to peel that off because you're losing some of those like micros in there. But the carrot greens itself, pesto,
Right.
You can totally use that to put it in, make a pesto out of it with a little bit of the same ingredients you would use with some basil and some pine nuts and lemon juice and Parmesan and olive oil. But there's some carrot greens.
So if you have your carrot, a lot of times if someone's buying fresh carrots and you've got the greens on the top is what Chef Ryan's talking about. You've got the carrot itself. A lot of times what someone's going to do is they're going to chop the greens off, chop the carrot top off with the greens, toss that, peel that carrot. So you're losing the outer peel of the carrot. You're losing the greens, and people are only using kind of the flesh of the inside of that carrot. Whereas that peel, if you did kind of peel it so you have the softer part that you're eating, you can save the peeling and make a vegetable stock.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I didn't even mention that, but for sure. Yeah. I mean, easily right in. We would do that, thinking back at the restaurants. Yes, we would, all of our vegetable scraps, when we're trimming onions to cut whatever we need for our mise en place, and, all those trims, yeah, would definitely go into the stock pot.
And that's just an example of like a carrot. But so all of the foods that you're having, think, how can I use this? Something even like a chicken, you can use the bones and simmer the bones and make a bone broth. Like, we spend a lot of money for protein rich bone broth at the store, but we can also make it ourselves.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to how much time you're willing to spend as well. And if you're very, maybe you don't want to buy the whole chicken if you don't have a lot of time in the kitchen because of what we were talking about earlier with, having a kind of a packed schedule. But thinking of food scraps, one of my favorites is...
I was just going to ask that. Like, what are some of your things that are like weird things that people think you couldn't have? Or
I love stalks of things. So like broccoli, when you buy broccoli, like sometimes you can just buy the kind of like that floret, right? And then other times you have that huge stalk that comes with it. And so you peel the stalk a little bit and you get your peeler on it. And this is something you probably will. I mean, I guess you could kind of save it for a stock or something, or maybe a soup. I mean, this is okay food waste in my opinion, like a little bit of like this really kind of woody peel around the stalk of the broccoli. But if you peel it back a little bit and it'll go from like a deep green to like a lighter kind of like whitish green, the stalk is so good. I slice it,
it's
and steam
sweet.
it or saute it. It's delicious, so good. Same thing with when chard or kale or collards. The stems are very fibrous and woody, which is good for you, good roughage for your body. But that kind of stuff steamed or sauteed, I personally love it. I do not throw any of that away.
What are other like pieces or parts that you think people are tossing and you're like, oh no, like don't?
I'm trying to think of some that I do. I mean, I compost out back, so
What about things that are like seafood related or meat related that might be things that people are tossing, or seafood produce?
Yeah, I mean, seafood, let's say you get a whole fish, or let's say you go fishing, right? You go out to Myrtle Grove or whatever, you catch a bunch of trout and you come home with them, and you clean them while you're out there, and you might scale them. But there's some cool stuff you can do with like the fish skin. but that might be kind of pushing it. I mean, you can definitely eat it. Of course, sear the fish with the skin on, but you can also make this, if you have a dehydrator, you can make it into a jerky. I mean, you can definitely fry the fins and kind of make like little crisps out of them, little chips. There's a ton of, let's say you fillet the fish and you get these two beautiful fillets, but you still have the fish spine and, kind of the ribs. It's called like, you might see it like as like a tartare, like salmon tartare, tuna tartare, but it's like spoon scrape. So you take a spoon and you scrape it against the meat right there and you get all this flesh that comes off, and that's totally good and totally edible. So that's something that can be, maybe at some point it gets worked into, I mean, this is getting kind of advanced, but it could be in some sort of like little kind of dumpling or something that eventually gets cooked that's mixed with flour.
But all of those little extras. And then the same thing of like the spine of the fish, you would save that and throw that into a seafood stock.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. That becomes 100%.
So if someone's doing this and they're saving these scraps and, with the intent to do a seafood stock or a vegetable stock or, something that they're, or even composting, the idea that, okay, I'm going to save this like fish carcass, where does someone put it? Like, what do you do with it? Because otherwise that could get gross soon.
I think it's okay to freeze it, but it has to be as airtight as possible. I'm not saying go out and buy a vacuum sealer for your food waste. Maybe you have a really good sort of airtight, reusable container that you can store it in. But I think what's important is that you try to use it within a week or two, and you don't just have like this bin in your freezer that's keeping a bunch of waste that eventually is just all in vain because you remember it in 4 months and it's covered in freezer burn and you throw it away, or your power goes out. And, so I think it's important, like, yes, you can save it if you don't have something to do with it immediately, but there should be, like we were talking about in the first segment of this, a plan. Like you should have a plan for it.
I want to talk freezer, but before we do, so we talked about planning, we talked about scraps, repurposing. What are some of your favorite ways to repurpose? So if you have leftover grilled vegetables or leftover chicken or whatever it is, like what are some of your favorite things to basically give it another life?
Well, thinking of a couple things, definitely, you kind of maybe around Mardi Gras, you get some Popeyes and you have some old fried chicken in the fridge. But I mean, old cold fried chicken's really good, but easily one of the best chicken salads, not very eat fit, but like you definitely make a good chicken salad. Maybe you're tired of eating chicken off the bone and with a little bit of some aioli and some vegetables. Maybe you have a little bit of some onion and celery that you need to dice up because you used it all last night except a little bit. Chicken salad. This is not a personal thing that I did, but really this story, I'll never forget this. Worked at a pizza place for a little while, way long ago. And we would do pizza by the slice, and the pies that didn't sell at the end of the night, there was a bus pan in the corner of the walk-in. And so after about 5 days, that bus pan was about like maybe 2 or 3 feet tall. It was a lot of pizza. And we would take all that pizza and then put it through a grinder, grind it into this kind of what looks like ground meat-ish. And then that would fill the calzones.
No.
So we would fill the new calzones with old pizzas.
Old pizza. So it would be the crust, the sauce.
It was the crust, the sauce, the pepperonis, the mushrooms,
everything.
Whatever's on it. A white pizza, a red pizza, green, whatever. Into the meat grinder.
So it was in like a meat grinder, not a blender.
No, this is like an industrial huge meat grinder.
Because it's frozen. So you're throwing these frozen old slices.
Yes. And then it turns into ground meat looking pizza. And then that would go.
So when your kids are like really leftovers, you'll be like, it could be worse.
Yeah. I mean, that's a way talk about a way not to lose any money.
Yes.
I mean, you already make a good amount of money.
Did anybody ask what this was?
No, they loved it. They ate it like it was just
what did they think it was? Like what was it called?
I don't know. I called it like cat food or something, or it was like it was like crack for people. I mean, they would just kind of people would get it.
It was like this nondescript filling inside of a calzone.
Yeah.
It was like
it would get a little bit of like red sauce on. I mean, he was like the smallest amount of pizza sauce and the smallest sprinkle of cheese. but yeah, when you open it up, it kind of couldn't really tell.
Wow. Did you like it? Did you think it tasted good?
I don't remember, and I think I was kind of mortified by it, honestly.
And you're like, if everyone just knew what this was. Yeah.
I was like, man, if everyone knew what this was, I would probably not work here. I would be ashamed to work here right now. But that's just the story.
To me, I think like my head goes straight to like a chicken salad, or if you've got something that's leftovers, you've got, I don't know, a pork loin. You can always do taco night like another time. Have like your corn tortillas. You and I are doing a segment coming up on tailgating, and it will be doing like pork tacos, but we have like a Korean, actually beef is what that's going to be. But anyway, we do a Korean beef dish. And that's something that you could just make extras of that and then turn it into tacos with kind of all the different like accompaniments in whatever way you wanted to have.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room to reuse. I mean, let's say you have a big roast. I mean, something that's sliced that can then become shredded and maybe it's cooked down with a sauce and it becomes, maybe, I mean, look at, for instance, red beans. I mean, that was kind of like red beans came into existence, right? Because there was like the Sunday roast or like the big Sunday meal. And then the leftover meat there would go into the pot with the beans and it would cook overnight or cook all day long. So yeah, I honestly, I don't have leftovers at home barely ever.
Because you're cooking for,
I typically cook for like 2 to 4 and then I'll eat for 3. And then Amanda will kind of, she'll have a dish or she'll bring it to work. But yeah.
Some of the things, like if you think about soups, you can, like an immersion blender can be like a phenomenal tool. Cause if you've got like say leftover roasted vegetables or steamed vegetables, you can cook those down, use your immersion blender, add a little bit of the canned coconut milk, or you could use, things that are going to kind of like make it creamy, use a broth or a chicken broth, a bone broth, and soups are one way. Another would be like pestos, like Chef Ryan said. Fruit, that is a big one that we use. If we have fresh fruit that is like on its way out and it's kind of a little bit like shrivelly, we immediately will freeze it. And then that just goes into smoothies. Like Brad's making smoothies all the time and we can buy frozen strawberries and all this stuff. But we'll also, before fruit goes bad, we freeze it.
Totally agree. Yeah. You should never have a banana go bad. It should always, and that's, I feel like I should have like that should be my saying or something. Should never have a banana that goes bad. Like you can just throw it right in the freezer and then it'll turn, the skin will turn brown and you run it under water for a little bit and peel it off and then throw it, or peel it and then right into a freezer bag. But bananas in a smoothie, so much better than ice. It gives it that same, it keeps everything cold while it's blending, but it gives it so much body without diluting anything. I love frozen bananas.
And it's also knowing how to store things properly so that you can get the most life out of it. Like store things so that they shrivel slower, but like fresh herbs, if you store herbs just like you would a little bouquet of flowers, and then put a little bit of a plastic over it, but have it in like a little ball jar like that, it's going to be better than if you're just letting it kind of like loose or just like kind of wilting inside of the bag. There's a book that I'm going to link to. It is called Now and Again, and it's an entire book dedicated to like leftovers. And so I think just kind of thinking about different things, I love the idea of you were kind of talking about like the pasta salad that like the old restaurant that you work for that was doing like the employee meals. But if you do have leftovers and then you take a healthier version of a pasta, it could be like a banza, like a chickpea pasta. It could be like the hearts of palm pasta, whatever it is. But if you've got a little bit of protein, a little bit of veg, whatever it is, toss it all together, put it with a little olive oil sauce or a little bit of a red sauce, whatever it is, or make it like a Greek yogurt and kind of make it like a creamy chilled salad or whatever it is. But there's so much that you can do that kind of just changes it a little bit.
Yeah, make a casserole.
Right,
is that kind of like the old way that everyone's moms used to kind of reappropriate things? Like it's a casserole now.
I feel like there's different things that people are called like that people don't call it a casserole anymore. I feel like it's called like one pot and ready or things like that.
Yeah, it's a quick quick one easy meal, one easy pot.
Right. There's other things that people don't say the casserole, but yes, I think you're right. Like throw it in, don't let it go bad. There was so we talked about scraps, we talked about planning ahead, repurposing. We're going to link to some that are really looking at just different strategies for repurposing. I had, there is a really talented baker, Carolyn Ketchum, and I've had her on this podcast before. And she is very much about, if you mess up a recipe, don't waste it. Find something that you can do with it. And even if it's a bakery thing and it didn't turn out as you wanted, can you still maybe, she uses the example, like if she did brownies and they turned out really dry and crumbly, and she does everything, no sugar, low carb, almond flour, it's everything is through that lens. But then she'll say, well, she could use those, blend them up and use them in like a healthy version of a cake pop later or something.
Or turn your oven to, 200, 250 degrees and let them go even longer. And then all of a sudden it's, you can kind of make a chocolate dirt or something. And that's, that can go in a parfait or could, become another component of a dessert.
So especially as you're experimenting with recipes, if things didn't turn out just as you wanted, then think, how can I use these as something else? And then of course there's ways that, we talked about throwing something with pasta or the old school casserole. To me, throwing anything with eggs is also a really good leftover. We were at a restaurant recently and they were having, I didn't tell you about this, but they had like a beast of a time in the kitchen. They had apparently the week prior, it was white linen night. And so, everyone's like downtown for white linen. I won't say which restaurant because we would definitely go back. I really liked it a lot.
We'll talk about it off the air.
We'll talk about it off the air. But they apparently the week prior had lost their executive chef, their sous chef, and their pastry chef. So the first part of our dinner was great. We sit down, everything's rolling. We get our, the first course. And then everything halted. And you could look around the restaurant and everyone, because they'd all been at white linen, they all had a lot of cocktails. Now they're like essentially hungover or sleepy because their food hasn't come and they're just waiting. The restaurant comped everybody in the dining room's entrees and more and more. But for that, we said, y'all, like, we'll just go ahead and cancel our entree. By the time it was getting an hour and a half had passed. And right as we're saying that, it comes to the table and God bless them, it was ice cold. We were like, oh no. But the first thing we said is, oh, we have some good, like fresh eggs from like the guys across the street, good, we were like, we're going to make an omelet with this in the morning or frittata with this in the morning. That was like our very first thought was, we'll throw it into some eggs tomorrow.
For sure.
And
eggs are like, you can do a million things with them. So when in doubt, just put it with some eggs.
So it was the steak that we had that was left over, slice it real thin, throw it in some eggs. There's so much. If you have like a leftover, beet salad, different beans, you can always puree them, make dips, make hummus. Like there's so many things that you can do with those.
Yeah. And also we didn't mention this, but getting into preserves and also dehydrating. I mean, you can, forget the brand, but there's some cheap, good dehydrators out there. And to me, it's very rewarding when it's strawberry season and I buy a whole flat of strawberries and I know I'm only going to eat like half of it. And then the rest of them get sliced up on my dehydrator. And then, they kind of roll for a couple of days. And then I have little strawberry chips that can go on, in yogurt or in your cereal.
How long does that take?
A day to 3 days.
But the prep time's not crazy.
No, it's just, and it's, to me, that's kind of fun too, of having a little project like that where maybe you're slicing 200 strawberries, or maybe not that many, but you do it with a friend and, you're doing it with your partner, your buddy and whatever. So just
it's like a little experiment.
Yeah. And then to me also making, any kind of jams or preserves or whatever is super rewarding that I think, is worth, for those interested, kind of getting a little book and experimenting with that.
Do you know that, the plant-based sweeteners, like Swerve and Iolus, they actually work well in preserves?
Cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, of course, you can do preserves just with less sugar, or you can try it with some of the plant-based no sugar options. On freezing, make your freezer work for you. Think ahead of this. If you're going to be freezing, I would say a couple of things. You can invest in like a vacuum sealer to do kind of smaller portions. We talked about that earlier. Or if you are going to freeze, make sure it's at least done well. You can wrap it in plastic, put it into like a Ziploc type bag. Make sure that you can put foil around it. Sometimes you may need to do multiple layers. Do you have any like strategy for that you would say if someone is going to be freezing something? Kind of how to wrap it better?
I used a lot of freezer bags. I don't use a lot, but that's kind of like my go-to method. And I will try to recycle the freezer bags.
Just like a
Ziploc freezer bag.
Because they're thicker.
Yeah, and I think, well, the reason I do that is because let's say you go to the store and you buy a packet of sausage, like you have. I found some really cool. It was like organic chicken andouille sausage at Whole Foods, and it comes in a 6-pack, and I don't want to eat 6 pieces of sausage, so I open the pack and then I freeze it all in the Ziploc bag so I can pull out 2 pieces at a time. Stuff like that. I read in a cookbook a long time ago that think about when you make a stock, like you don't need to freeze. We at that Roosevelt, we would there'd be like 5 gallons of stock frozen, and it would just take forever to defrost because you need like a quart or something like that. So like you can use an ice cube tray, right? You just take, and then you just pop out 4 or 5 ice cubes, and then you have just the right amount that you need for your risotto or whatever dish that you're working on.
To me, the ice cube tray for freezing things, whether it's like you said, a stock, a broth, I like to do that with pesto. If you're doing like fresh herbs, if you have herbs that you're going to freeze, putting a little bit of freezing them in an olive oil cube, because then you're basically taking it out. You've got olive oil, which is not going to really freeze. It's still going to be a little bit goopy, but it's really holding that herb in a nice space, and you're going to put it into your skillet with that oil anyway. So that can be like one way, or like pureeing the herbs, putting with a little bit of oil, but definitely use your freezer in that way. But thinking of when you're going to use it, what portion are you going to want to use it in, and then freeze it that way and label it and date it.
True.
Because otherwise you're just going to have these
yes,
like that Progressive commercial.
Yes. Yes. We are talking about waste right now. So it's good to know when. It's like, you're like, how long has this been in here? And then you're like, a year. I guess we throw it away. So
and
it's very good to label.
Freezing things can last forever, but not everything should last forever. The quality of it. Do you know when Brad and I got married, which has been 2006. So we had people save the top of their wedding cake.
Yeah.
Chef Ryan is engaged, so tuck this one away for later. We saved the wedding top because people tend to,
eat it
tradition
a year later.
is, 1 year you eat it. But I was like, I really want to save it and I want to make it last. And so I sliced one thin slice, and then we lay the way that the cake baker had told us to do it was, she wrapped it a lot of times in a plastic wrap, and then put a foil around that, and then she put a kitchen trash bag around that. So it had all these layers to kind of insulate it. So 1 year we had a slice, and then I made it last for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And then at 10 years, she made us a new top.
Oh, cool.
It was so fantastic. And so,
did you notice any change in the flavor, or kind of?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it was definitely not like a fresh cake, but it was stunningly not bad for 9 and 10-year-old wedding cake. You could 100% pick up on a freezer burn, but I still would have that whole slice that we would slice. I thought it wasn't like I'm going to take a bite just because. I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was still good. So it is possible to do it, but again, depending on what it is, the quality is not going to be there.
And so when y'all took it out of the freezer to eat it, would it be, did you eat it kind of frozen, or would you let it sit out overnight and slack a little bit?
And sometimes if we're going out of town or even out of the country, we would take it with us in a little Tupperware. So for the years we've had our anniversary cake slice in all types of interesting places. One time I forgot it, and my mother-in-law, who's amazing, FedExed it to us.
Cool.
Slice of the
So it had been frozen for a few years and then traveled partially across the country.
Yes. And then
it was still just as special as the first night.
We would bring it to places, and when you tell them, because you're showing up at maybe a nice restaurant because it's your anniversary, and then you've got a Tupperware with a cake slice in it that you've brought for yourself, and they would be a little bit huh? And then when you tell them, they'd be oh, that's cool. So the way that restaurants would choose to plate it up and present it.
Yeah, exactly. How can they then surprise and delight you? It's okay, now it's up to us to make this a little, what can we do to make it a little bit?
Yeah, it was so that was one of our longest of keeping something in the freezer. But definitely date it, write it on there, use it. Think about what size are you going to be wanting to thaw it, defrost it whenever you're ready to use it, so that you aren't having, like Chef Ryan said, a whole 5 gallons of something when you really just need a couple of teaspoons. You can use that for, I think, tomato paste and things like that you're opening a can of something, using hardly any, and then, use that to freeze.
It's okay to refreeze stuff. I think there might be, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of some confusion about once you defrost something. I mean, it's really okay to refreeze it. I mean, if you have 2 cups of stock and you defrost it and then you freeze it because you use 1 cup, freeze it again. I mean, you just have to remember how long it's been you don't want it to sit on your shelf for 7 days
Right.
or to sit in the refrigerator. Then you might get into like a little bit of spoilage. But like if you defrost something, don't use all of it, totally fine to freeze it again.
And some of the things that freeze really well, breads, bakery items, those kind of things freeze really well. The texture is still going to be good.
Yes.
Things like vegetables, sometimes it's like damaging the actual kind of like the cells and the membranes of the vegetables. And so it might not be as good of a texture. It might feel a little soggy or mushy after.
Yes, you will start to kind of lose a little bit of the integrity and the quality of it. To vegetables, I think work best if they're cooked before you freeze them. Not in all cases, but I think a lot of them. Like you don't want to really freeze like a whole eggplant,
right?
But I think if it's like chopped up and it's been sautéed a little bit, like that's totally cool. On the other hand, it's no big deal. Maybe freezing peas or something like that. I don't think it's necessary to cook it so much.
And then I also think slicing things before we freeze it can sometimes be more helpful. Like if I did have an eggplant that for some reason I wanted to freeze like a raw eggplant, I might think that if it was sliced, it could be a little bit easier than defrosting that whole eggplant. Or bread, like my sister-in-law does homemade sourdough bread. And so we'll slice that first, then freeze it because it's easier to then just kind of pop off a slice.
Yes.
For bags, you mentioned like the freezer bags, like the Ziploc kind of freezer bags, the heavy duty plastic bags. Have you used any of like the reusable silicone bags for freezing?
No, I have not. I should look into that.
I would feel like you'd probably want to wrap it in something inside of it and then put it in there. But yeah, I think that that's something to look into. How do you do it without it getting kind of funky in there? The freezer paper is something else that can work. There's like Reynolds has like their freezer paper, just like you would get like foil. The heavy duty foils, of course. Glass, freezer safe glass containers, those can work. We use that, and I kind of use that to put the labels on it. So just thinking like, how can you make it fit into your freezer? How can you keep it as airtight as possible? Again, we can't say it enough of putting on the label what it is and then putting the date so that you don't have these sort of like curiosities that you're finding in your freezer.
Here's a good tip for freezing things. I was just thinking about this with kind of restaurant experience. Try to freeze things flat. I mean, let's say you have like 2 quarts of spaghetti sauce left over, which freezes great, and then you can save it for another time. Instead of just taking that bag and kind of plopping it in there, maybe clear a shelf out so that you can kind of press it down so it's flat. And then once it freezes, you can put it back up vertically and have a very organized space. Because if you just kind of plop everything in there, you can visualize it, right? It's like this bag that's frozen and it kind of looks like it just has like this weird sort of shape. I don't even know what to call it, but it takes up way too much real estate,
Lost at the bottom of the freezer too. Yeah, it gets kind of tucked at the bottom. Okay, a couple of notes on composting. Tell us if someone has never composted, where would they start? Well, first of all, say what composting is, and then where would we start? I
think the definition of composting. I think composting is when you let the elements take care of your waste and turn it into something reusable. I don't know if that's the best definition.
By elements, he means the heat.
The earth, the heat, the let's say worms and whatever is in the soil.
Air,
the
oxygen.
air, exactly, or maybe even the lack of oxygen or whatever. So I compost at home. I think that probably the most important thing to know is that composting is not throwing a bunch of food in a bin. And let's say maybe you just start with some like organic potting soil, just kind of as like a base to start with, right? You need to have a balance of like green matter and brown matter. Green matter being, let's say, like all your food scraps, right? Mm-hmm. That tend to be high in nitrogen, versus the brown matter, which is like leaves in the fall, cardboard, paper towel rolls, pine needles, things that add carbon to the soil. So you end up just putting a bunch of food in a bucket with some dirt. You'll just have a really, really nitrogen-rich soil that will end up not doing any good to your plants. It'll end up harming it. So I think what's important is that if you are going to compost, you need to also remember that the paper towels that you use in your house, your toilet paper rolls, your paper towel rolls, I don't really get into newspapers so much because of the ink on it, but maybe like the brown bags from the grocery store. Those also serve a very, very important place, probably even more important than having the food scraps in the compost bin. So those are things that you need to, when you rake the yard up, or instead of throwing that paper towel in the trash can. Sorry, it's raining outside, and that's like a miracle here. It's been like a month and a half now.
Yeah, as Chef Ryan and I, as we started, it was like blistering heat outside. And just in the 55 minutes that we've been, it is like the skies turn black. It's rolling in. I know. We're like, it's been like a month.
I make sure to water my compost too. I'm like, it's probably so dry too.
Right.
So you have to turn it, right? You want to turn it every once in a while. It helps kind of aerate it.
What's the ratio of green matter to brown matter?
I don't know exactly. I'm not the best on that, but I would think it probably, if not 1-to-1, erring on the side of a little bit more of your brown kind of stuff.
It's wet and wet.
It's kind of wet, but definitely don't forget the brown matter.
So, and I think that that's an easy thing for people to put in. Paper towels and, like you said, the rolls or cardboard, like that stuff that people wouldn't think of composting. They might instead put that in a recycle bin. But when you are composting, you can put that in there with leaves, with dirt. Some people do a bin. Some people do like a countertop little bin that's like, sealed and stuff like that. Others will put it into their freezer to then later add to the compost. Some people have it outside where it's a bin, almost like trash can style. Yes. What's yours like? Yeah.
So, you can probably spend hundreds of dollars on a tumbler or something off of Amazon that, you turn in a compost. But I have, think of like a large round Rubbermaid storage container that I cut the bottom out of and then kind of sunk that into the ground just a little bit. So the compost that I'm making actually also has like direct earth access. Mm-hmm. I don't know how important that is. I just thought it was kind of cool. Mm-hmm. So I did it that way.
One woman told me that she almost carves like a trough into her yard and she puts the compost in there.
Yeah, if you want to, I've been to some community gardens where there's just an area, like it's just a corner where they throw their food waste and then they throw leaves and stuff over it. I mean, you will attract the benefit of having like one of those tumblers is, there's less potential of attracting vermin or whatever, possums and whatever. But I mean, come on, y'all, it's natural. We're outside. It's like, it's just going to happen.
So we've got planning ahead. We've got using our scraps, that nose to tail cooking. We've got repurposing, finding ways that we're going to do creative things with those leftovers. I'm going to link to some resources specifically for that. We've got how are we going to save it for later, especially using that freezer and being smart about how we use that freezer. And then exploring the concept of composting. I actually did a podcast maybe a year and a half ago on composting with someone locally who does a lot of composting resources. And so I'll link to that podcast as well. And then going back to like why we care, we're looking at the environmental impact, the fact that our food waste has more carbon emissions than even the airlines do, the fact that we are typically wasting and losing a third of our food, which means we're basically losing a third of the money that we're spending on our food. And so again, and then, if those first couple of reasons aren't mattering to us about the environment, or like we said, kind of the respect of where these ingredients came from, at least our pocketbook can drive us. So all of this we've talked about, there's a lot of different steps that we're saying here. And if you even just hear some of like what we can do better, okay, I can do a little bit better on planning so that I'm not buying all these things. I think a lot of times too, we get into the store, we're excited to maybe try something new. We think we're going to have more time maybe than what we really do. And so we end up with buying more ingredients than nights we have at home before those things go bad or whatever it is. So that planning is going to be key. If that's your thing, then focus on planning. If you're doing well on planning, but you're making, you end up, the leftovers aren't really appealing to you, then spend some time on thinking, how can you repurpose those leftovers? So we've covered a lot, but think about it just of which of these areas maybe are kind of like your weak spot, that area that we could, increase, do a little bit better on, kind of like increase that edge on and put your focus into that space. I'll include the link to a lot of these things that we talked about and some other resources that maybe we can share with y'all on composting and stuff like that. Anything else for our listeners?
With any lifestyle change, I just suggest don't get too stressed out about doing it all at once. Just one step, just the tiniest step. And this is something great that I heard. It's do yourself into thinking rather than think yourself into doing. Just start, just do it. Just put a little bowl on the counter and keep your scraps there. Just start a little compost, or something that you typically throw away, save it, get online later. Maybe you have like 5 minutes and just kind of Google it and say like, what can I do with this? But yeah, it's been super, super fun. It's amazing how fast an hour will pass. Can I give everyone my information? So I think if there are any questions and you want to like maybe email me, it's ryan.conn, so ryan.conn @ochsner.org. Please feel free to just send me a random email saying like, hey, I have all this stuff. Maybe I kind of spoke on something and then just kind of went on a tangent, and you'd like a little bit more information. And it's absolutely my pleasure to try to share and help and teach.
I'll include also that in your email in the show notes as well. And also the link to our FUEL Cafe there.
I want to hear from everyone that's listened to this.
Your thoughts. You did really great on your first podcast.
It was fun. I want to do more.
Yeah. No, you're really, really fantastic.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Hey, thanks.
A tremendous thank you to Chef Ryan Conn for joining us today. I always enjoy working with him so much. I mean, he is always an enthusiastic and incredibly talented partner in crime. It's so much fun working on new recipes with him, finding things that, work for him and his culinary creations that also meet our nutritional criteria, nutritional expectations. And he's just fully embraced the Eat Fit concept and culture, and has just been like such a valuable addition. And he's also incredibly passionate about sustainability, the environment. And so I thought that he would just be a really good addition for this podcast. So I'll include the links that we talked about in the show notes of this episode, also his contact information, and let us know what you think. As we were talking about, we always want to hear about it. If you are incorporating some of the things that we talked about, if there's other strategies that have worked really well for you, we want to know about it. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. And if you'd like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.